Well, it's variable. Yeah.
aspect of it.
How you experience those themes and those energies are variable because it is a undefined area in your chart. And so depending on who you come in contact with, if they're defined in those areas or not, you're going to experience it how they experience it. And so in the conversation of conditioning, this is important. Human design reveals who you are energetically and who you came here to be. I'm Dana, the human design specialist.
And I'm Haley, the human design newbie. Listen in as we explore how leaning into your authentic self is your ultimate path to success. Today we're diving into
Conditioning.
dun dun dun.
We'll work on it. We'll work on it. Okay. Yes, conditioning. What is it? Where does it come from? Because conditioning is, I've probably already talked about it on the podcast already, used the words,
Yes.
I'm sure. So, in the context of human design, we will kind of dig into different types of conditioning, and it's not all in the chart. So, well, first of all, when we talk about conditioning, let's start with sort of a review of the chart as a whole, because if we're going to talk about sort of what we touched in the last episodes about the centers on what is defined in your chart and what is undefined in your chart. So how do you know when you're looking at a chart, what are the defined parts, Haley? The ones that are.
So they're defined if it's colored in
Mhm.
the center, and it becomes defined if it has a channel that connects it to another center.
Yes. And so if it's undefined, how does it look?
It's open. It's no color. No color.
White. It's white. Yeah.
Well, unless
Yes.
it's up against black and
Oh,
it's
okay.
open.
Okay.
It's open.
It's not a
Easy.
PNG, a ping pile. Um, Anywho, yes. So each of us has a unique expression, and our charts will all look different. Some will have definition and some won't. But before we go into this discussion about where to find possible areas of conditioning in the chart, I wanted to touch on that again because it's important to remember that the chart it kind of encompasses all the different archetypes of the human experience and themes. So that being said, we all have all of the themes that are represented in the chart through the gates and everything, but it's a matter of which themes are going to be more consistent. Obviously within us, that would be our defined areas. Those are areas where it's more of a inner process in yourself, working with your own energy of, what that expression is like. Or if it's in an undefined area, those are gates, centers, whatever that you're going to learn about through your interactions with other people. And so
So if they're defined, are they just kind of more prominent throughout your life?
yeah, it's consistent. So like if you remember the idea or I don't know if it was analogy, but we were describing it as is just defined areas are like the broadcasting signal for yourself. So those are
Mm-hmm.
areas that are those consistent energy themes in you. So especially in the context of this conversation, generally the undefined areas in your chart are where you're more likely to pick up conditioning and exhibit behaviors that aren't necessarily yours.
That makes sense.
Because yes, because you're taking it in from others.
You have that openness to it. It's not, you don't have your own, like you said, internal
Well, it's variable.
aspect
Yeah.
of it.
How you experience those themes and those energies are variable because it is a undefined area in your chart. And so depending on who you come in contact with, if they're defined in those areas or not, you're going to experience it how they experience it. And so in the conversation of conditioning, this is important. So like I said, the chart can help guide us towards certain areas and themes where there might be conditioning because each gait has sort of a high expression, low expression, they'll call it, more of a shadow side or more of a gift side to it, which also brings in the work of Richard Rudd in the Gene Keys, which I use a lot. I don't necessarily, it's not something you really teach. I don't teach it. I mean, there are people that do, but his work is like a real contemplative work about these, and it's not human design. It's his own different take on what all these themes are, but it's a good component to use with human design. Anyways, I digress. But he takes all these themes, and it's a high, what he calls a shadow expression, a gift expression, and then a really I'm going to say the word, it's Siddhi, but it's spelled Siddhi, which is a Sanskrit word for the highest level of attainment. It's like what they call in yoga and all that stuff would be like the siddhis. It's like the bliss state, basically. Something like that. So each gate will have different levels of expression, and they change. I think it's important to note that, there might be a shadow side to something, and then like a gift side, and then that really high side of something. But it doesn't mean that once you get out of the shadow state, you never go back, because we're human. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we'll be exhibiting more shadow behaviors and some not. But
so is the gift and the shadow kind of like a positive and negative side to it?
No, it's not a positive and a negative, because I don't want to use like one is bad and one is good. It is more of I see them more as ways for you to really notice if you're getting off track or you're out of alignment, kind of like the not self themes that we were talking about, the emotional themes of the types. How if a generator's frustrated, they might need to take a look and see if they're acting, in accordance with their type and strategy. Whereas some of these themes in the chart, when you are aware of what they are, the higher or lower or shadow or gift expression of something, then if you are starting to become more aware of yourself and your behaviors, you can say like, hey, I'm kind of acting from a place of lack or fear or anything like that. Like we talked about in the centers, in the spleen center, for example, there's the shadow energies there. There's a lot of fear, but then on the flip side, there's a lot of courage and there's intuition. There's all this other stuff there too. So anyways, when we are looking at the chart and trying to figure out what some of our conditioned behaviors might be, we can first look at maybe our openness, because this is one of the areas. So let's talk about for a second, before I keep going down that road, is that conditioning is used, not just in human design. It's used in a lot of psychology and behavioral studies and stuff. Like my niece, your cousin, I see in her homework, she's in high school and she's in this psychology class, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm looking at all the Western psychology and all the behavioral therapies and stuff. It's very interesting. But of course, I always have to put my 2 cents in. Anyways, so conditioning really is, where are we acting in a certain way, have certain behaviors, have certain beliefs that maybe aren't truly our own. It's more coming from something outside of ourselves that we've taken on certain beliefs or identities because of some other influence, but it's not really us.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, we all learn things from our parents and our environment when we're young, and we kind of take those with us.
Mm-hmm. So in the lens of human design, which is what I'm going to stick with, because I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, any of that stuff. I'm not a behavioral therapist. I am just somebody who has lived a long time, done a lot of her own work on herself, and now has this tool of human design has really helped me to laser in on certain behaviors or traits or beliefs. Really is the thing for me that it helps with, is beliefs that I have probably taken on that aren't necessarily true, or they're not really helpful to me. They may be coming from somewhere else. So How we like to look at it and how I've been taught to look at it is there's several different ways that we can pick up conditioning. There's 5 different ways in particular we're going to talk about, and they're kind of overlapping. And so we'll just list them and then we'll kind of dig into each one. So they are openness in the chart. There is imprinting. There's something with the design crystal. There is generational traumas and epigenetics. Okay. So as we start digging into that, first of all, the openness in the chart, as we said, shows you areas where you are amplifying energy, right, from others. And therefore, because you are amplifying that energy because you're open there, you feel it more intensely.
Right.
Let's say that. So that's like, especially people with like who are undefined in the emotional solar plexus are sometimes seen as more emotional people, and they're more variable, and they've probably been told they're, ups and downs, and they're all over the place with their emotions. Right. And I've seen people who have been told that in their lives, and then when they realize that they are undefined in that area, that can give them that perspective of like, oh, well, whose emotions were were was I amplifying? Was that me or was that someone else? Right. So that being said, these are areas that you might take in behaviors that you start identifying more as being part of you because they feel more real. Does that make sense?
Say that again.
In your open centers, because those are areas where you're taking in the energies of others and amplifying it and reflecting it back out, they say, but really that's you acting in that way. The person can start to believe that that expression of those energies is really them, right? Because they feel it more intensely. And people will tell them, whoa, that's a lot, you're like this or you're like that, but really you're just reflecting back the people that you're with. Okay. So yes. These are areas where, especially if you're not aware of this, which most of us aren't aware of this information, that over the years growing up, you just like are told this is you and you feel it. You're like, yeah, that sounds like me. I'm really emotional, but maybe you're not. So it's a good place to look in your own behaviors. But if you're someone who like maybe works with clients or, somebody else that, coach or whatever, and therapy, that especially with patients that have not, or customers or clients that have been having these blocks, is to look in these areas and see what their definition is, because especially with an open center, but they might have gates that are defined, that would give even more clues as to how they're expressing that energy, if it's really theirs or if it's somewhere else. So that's openness. That's one area. It's a big one. I mean, it's definitely one we can point to.
So would you say, is there, like, out of the 5 types of conditionings, is there ones that are probably more prominent or more typical? Like, would openness be probably the biggest source of conditioning?
Yeah, because it's not limited to just your family of origin, which is the next, imprinting is the next one. Like I said, I feel there's a lot of overlap in these, because that openness, and let's put it this way too, conditioning is not all in the past. It's ongoing, right? I mean, as long as you're living, this is something that you're going to have to keep checking in with, because you're always coming in contact with other people. You're always having new experiences. And like we said, nothing is fixed in stone as far as, I mean, because even the chart, even though we say, oh, this is your energetic blueprint, your map, this is, how you're designed to be. But you've got a whole life experience and things that are going on around you all the time. That's going to really puts it in your hands to choose how you want to be, which is,
and I mean, things are always changing, so you always have to stay on top of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at the last couple years. I think everybody saw that firsthand of how things change and really quickly and can be totally out of your control.
Yeah.
And who are you going to be in that moment? So I could talk about that for a long time, but I'm trying to stay on
Side
topic
note.
today.
Side note.
Put that in the Trello board. New topic.
Side note. Did you see that they
I
lifted the mask mandate on planes?
did. I did.
That's weird.
Yeah. I actually saw somebody I know with a picture. Oh, hey, I'm on a plane without a mask. I mean, I might be tempted to wear a mask on a plane forever. People always get sick, right? When they're on planes, all
Yeah.
that recycled air. Whether or not it's COVID, it'll probably be something you'll pick up on a plane. I know when I flew last September, I had my mask on, but I wish there was times I could have pulled off. But still people are drinking water, they're eating stuff. It's that same thing. You're like, you know, I would like for them to just enact no talking on planes. That would be great. Because I usually travel alone.
Silent plane.
Wouldn't that be great? You either have to read a book or watch a movie or sleep and nobody talk.
I mean, my flight to Tampa was actually pretty quiet. And then the flight back, the people in the row next to us, they were talking the whole time, but I'm just putting my headphones.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyways, sorry. I had that thought, and I would have just kept going with that, thinking about that instead of paying attention. So.
All right. Okay. I'm glad you got it out. So, back to the show. Imprinting.
They don't know we left.
Another type of conditioning, imprinting, which comes from basically what we've talked about a lot: your family of origin, your formative years, those in your environment, your immediate environment, which I think is the strongest one, which ties in with openness, like I said, in that, it's baked into the whole thing that we're going to get imprinted from others.
All I can think about is baby ducks.
Oh.
They'll imprint you as their mother.
Oh. I love that episode. Those episodes of Modern Family. I love that when the ducks imprint on Claire instead of Phil. Anyways, so this is a really big one, and I think it's probably what people struggle with the most, because it is really hard to recognize, I think, a lot of times that it's even happened or happening. And a lot of times people don't realize it until they're older, maybe even when they have their own children or when they get out of the house. Usually it happens when they get out of the house, go to college, or just you're out of your family's immediate environment, and you start learning other people's ideas of the world and how other people think and how they do things. You're like, what? Not everybody does this like my family does. And then you can start questioning things more. Like I said, I think for myself, when started doing yoga and all this stuff and learning about these things, because imprinting, I think they would probably refer to that in yoga as samskara. Let's hope that's the right word, samskara, which are what they describe as these grooves in the mind. So it's like repeated behaviors creates these samskaras, these grooves, which is basically just that conditioned thought. It's something over and over and over again. So you have these imprinted grooves in your consciousness that you have to change, that you have to basically look at it and ask yourself, do I really believe this? Is this really me? Is this the story I want to tell? And you have to start telling yourself a new story and start telling new stories. And it takes a lot of work. I mean, it can or it can't, but a lot of people don't even want to do that. A lot of people don't even want to. I don't think anybody listening to this podcast, though, because I think anybody that's listening to this is probably ready to start thinking a little differently.
Ready to smooth out those grooves.
Yeah. So, but yeah, early friends, teachers, etc., anybody that you came in contact with a lot while you were forming your ideas about the world. I mean, you grew up with me, so I
Yes.
changed over the years, but can you think of anything in your friends or in your family or anything that you got out in the world and were like, I know it's a tricky one. I didn't give you enough time to think about it.
I don't know really.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think when I started doing yoga and doing all that stuff, it was like 2004. And so you're still pretty young. And I realized in my first couple years when I started really digging into like the philosophy and all this stuff around mindset that I was like, oh shit. Whoa. Oh Lord. I had a lot of guilt. I felt really bad because also before I started doing yoga, meditation, all that, I was on anxiety medication because I didn't sleep well because my kids woke up all the time. Young
Hello.
moms, everybody has that problem. But I was a lot angrier because I think I was just tired. And I realized I probably yelled more than I should. And I was really worried. You know, every mom is worried about damaging their children irreparably, at least the good ones know. And it was a wake up call that I really had to start changing my behavior because I didn't want to make that the norm for
Well,
your life.
to make you feel better, I don't remember you being angry or, anything like that. Like, I just remember a chappy childhood. Happy
Chappy
childhood.
childhood. It's my goal, a chappy childhood. Yeah. I would think something that probably got passed on a lot, probably for you, I would say, if I had to guess, would probably be around money and work because it was such a big issue in our family. Because, I mean, you're a very stable person. Not that we're unstable.
Just me personally as a
Yeah.
person, you're saying I'm stable.
Well, I think there's a lot that's inherent in you, obviously, in your design that you are a certain way, anyhow, of just your demeanor is different than the rest of it. Not demeanor, you're like your dad and I would always say, like, I don't know where she got this. You're very self motivated, you're very organized, you're very like all these things, right? And we'd always be like, I guess it came from grandma. I don't know because we are not that. We're very, like, oh, what's happening today kind of people. And we're always just making do and making it work. And, where you like to plan and you went to school, got a good job, and financially are stable. And you've picked a mate who's financially stable because your childhood, not so stable because
His childhood as well.
well, his too, because we owned our own business and it was seasonal and it was,
So
you know,
awesome childhood.
thank you. Listeners, if you don't know us, if we grow past, our family listening to this podcast,
Hey, people go and start at the beginning of podcasts.
my friends out there in Russia and the Netherlands, if you're listening, we owned a beach business for 18 years. We did parasailing and banana boat rides on the beach here in Myrtle Beach. So that was Haley growing up, and it was the best thing for her. For your brother, not so much. Doesn't like it. Anyways, I was gonna say it was a feast or famine environment because
Yeah.
it was a lot of hard work, very physical work, demanding 7 days a week. It followed us home with phone calls and everything else from
Paperwork.
customers, paperwork, but there would be a lot of money that comes in and then just as much money goes out to keep running the business. And then it only ran for 6 months a year. And then it was like, oh, we're doing odd jobs in the wintertime trying to make it work because I can never figure out why every year it could make so much money. And then it would all be gone. And I'm still in the same house, same car, same situation. Like, I didn't get rich, but I can imagine the ups and downs of that. And, it would get stressful in the wintertime. Where's the money coming from? So maybe in some way we imprinted all these things on you that work is hard and all this other stuff, and you have to change that story for yourself. Maybe you did because I don't know. I may have gotten off on a tangent again. But, anyways, how we grow up affects what we believe about life in the world. And it's not until you start questioning whose story is this, whose life of I'm living, do you really start getting the heart of the matter. So let's move on. The next one's in the next three I think kind of overlap as well too. And I feel like the openness and the imprinting are very much on that like side of what we're aware of. That's not even true because it can be in your subconscious. Now these other ones are a little more, let's say, out of our control as to, we'll just go with it. Okay. So one, I hadn't really heard this before, but this is, something I picked up and I could see how it could be true, is the design crystal. So we talked about how there's the personality crystal and the design crystal in the origin story, episode 2. I don't want to go into it. Listen to it. I'm just saying. It's in episode 2 about the personality design crystal. So basically the design crystal resides in the ajna center, and it was called forth at conception. It was called forth by the father's energy 8 hours or so before conception. And they said they just kind of hang out in the earth. This is that,
They're just chilling.
the
just
one
waiting.
part of human design. I'm like, really? There's just crystals hanging out in the earth? I mean, they're not literal crystals,
I
but
mean,
you
no,
know,
they're just hanging.
they're just hanging,
Chilling.
So it carries the information from basically all the previous incarnations, right? So it's in there because I also heard somewhere once, and it might have been, I think it was Karen Curry Parker saying, if you think about the immenseness of our souls, our energy that is us over millennia or whatever, it's too big to fit into a human body. It's too big to bring down into this level of vibration. And so that's how we get that personality side of the chart. The right side of the chart is in the black numbers is, okay, this is what we're going to work on this time around. And using the design crystal, this is the vehicle we're going to use. This is the aspects that, according to this theory about conditioning, is that there's things in that design crystal that also need to be kind of worked out. It's carrying information from all these other incarnations, and it also needs a little bit of healing. It needs to kind of polish off the stone, so to speak, the diamond. Polishing the diamond is what I said, to refine it, right? Because ultimately that's, I think, the purpose of everything is to just, refine it and learn it and get rid of all the icky stuff hanging around. And because to me, never mind. As I say, I was going to keep going on my philosophies about what God is.
Gus.
Like, no.
It's Gus.
Okay. So there are things that in this lifetime need a little clearing out that was experienced in previous journeys. So that's another form of conditioning that could be relevant. So if you looked at the design chart, you could see the different themes in your design side, which is what a lot of people also refer to as the quote unquote unconscious side, the more hidden aspects of yourself that I think do, as you get older, you start to recognize it more, but another place to look. Okay. So the next one, generational. And so it's interesting if you have access to birth information for like your grandparents and your parents and everything else, which obviously you do.
So
You can see that there will be similarities. Basically, it's something else that can skip a generation. So like similarities from grandparents to grandchildren. And it doesn't mean they're identical or anything, but you might see certain gates or channels or, even things that keep carrying on, and you can see certain things that get carried through. So, and what I like to think of it is that, say, it's almost like chicken or egg, like how far back can you go? I'm thinking like, say myself, we're going to talk about me again. So say if I had issues that happened or occurred with my mother or my father, right? And they don't necessarily have to be in this, actual noticeable things. They could just be like themes, like energies or certain themes, right? Because that's all the gates and the expressions are.
Right.
I might not carry those themes, but my children might. So you kind of learn about it from both aspects. You learn about it as someone who is your parent that exhibits that energy, and then you learn about it as someone who is your child, which I can tell you from experience without a doubt is a totally different experience of how you relate to your parents than how do you relate to your children, because your parents you can be very much like what do you know, and just butt heads your whole life, but your children you're like, oh, I never want to have a bad relationship with you. I want everything to be perfect. I will do anything, you know. So you can. It's another opportunity for us to learn. So, but generational also could be like that's energetically. We're talking about that in the human design chart, but also there's just things that get passed down in families. You know, from
Mm-hmm.
generation to generation, dysfunctions, those type of things. So. But we could also say the issues that we had with our parents are similar, could be healed through our children, kind of thing, through that experience. So the last one I had to look into a little bit more, epigenetics. Okay,
What?
epigenetics. Because I was like, well, what's the difference between epigenetics and generational stuff, right? I thought it was kind of the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Sure.
I actually, it was very interesting because it says that certain traumas that are experienced can leave a chemical mark on our genes, like our actual physical
Oh, that's like
genes.
the rats or the
Exactly.
mice.
Yes, which can be passed on to the
Yeah.
descendants. So it says it doesn't, it's a mark, but it's not an actual genetic mutation, but it does
Mm-hmm.
alter how the gene is expressed, right? It's not genetic, it's epigenetic. So,
Sure.
yeah, it really started gaining traction. This whole thought that, you know, this, what can be experienced by a parent or ancestor could be passed through our genes, our epigenes, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned the mice. Yeah, they had done certain experiments about,
Yeah, they like would they I think they like made this thing that I think would shock the mice, and
mhm,
then once those mice that had been shocked had offspring, the offspring were like reintroduced to that thing, and they like would not go near it
mhm,
even though they had never interacted with it. They just
mhm,
they like knew that it would hurt them.
mhm. Yeah. And then there was also one I read about this worm. And a worm. It's called a
A worm?
nematode worm. Hmm.
Nematode.
Very. It's yeah, nematode. I don't know, but it eats decaying material, right? So,
Ah, yes, yes.
right, yes. Doesn't it sound like something you want to know about?
Ah.
But of course, in decaying material, there's bacteria. There's good bacteria. There's
Mm-hmm.
bad bacteria. It doesn't really know which one it is when it's eating it. It's
True.
just a worm. I don't think they have. Do they have brains? I think they have two hearts, no brains.
I
That's
don't
the earthworm.
think I don't know worms.
Anyways, but when they ate, they saw that when they ate the lethal bacteria, which they found that the females would tend to lay eggs after they ingested the lethal material. They would, before they would die, they would lay eggs. And they're like, you wouldn't think that'd be something they do right before they die. But the knowledge of the trauma and the subsequent death of the parent worm, let's say, was passed through genetic markers to the offspring. And so from there on out, these worms would avoid this things that had this type of bacteria in it.
How can they test that? Like, how do they know that it's within the genes that they can
Science,
tell?
Haley.
How is it?
It's called science.
Ah, yes, yes.
I think we discussed earlier that these scientists are very patient people. They can spend their life, I don't mean life, their careers studying worms. And that's great. I think it's awesome. But to bring it into human examples, I was reading about research they did on something that happened during World War II. It was referred to as the Dutch Hunger Winter, and it was an extended period of famine when the Nazis basically blocked food supplies. in October of 44 to the Netherlands. So it was really awful. So that when they were liberated, there was thousands, like 20,000 people had died of starvation. It was horrible.
That is
And
horrible.
it is horrible. It's horrible. And it's horrible that it's happening again right now. But so pregnant women were particularly vulnerable in this situation. And it says that the famine actually impacted the unborn children for the rest of their lives. So while they were in utero, they found that those who had been in your utero during the famine, so they were, in their mothers,
Babies.
they were actually heavier than average. You would think it would be the difference, that their
The
babies.
opposite. They would be lighter.
But the thinking goes that because the mothers were starving, automatically it quieted a gene in the unborn children that involved burning the body's fuel.
Huh.
Isn't that
So
crazy?
then so you said it affected them for their life. So I wonder if they were always,
Yeah, they
if
were a little
those
bit.
children tended to be heavier
They
through
were, yeah,
their entire life.
yeah.
Huh.
When they reached middle age, they had higher levels of the LDL cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, and triglyceride levels, and they also suffered from higher rates of obesity and diabetes, heart disease, and even unfortunately schizophrenia, because while they were there, the genes were expressed differently because of what was happening, in the outside environment. So they found that when they looked at these descendants, these offspring, they found that they all carried a specific chemical marker, an epigenetic signature on their genes.
Wonder why more schizophrenia.
I thought, and I just learned this last night, that there is also evidence of some viral infections that occur in the mother or something like that that can have some kind of cause of schizophrenia. And I am not a doctor. I'm not an expert. I am just hosting my little podcast here about human design and not about schizophrenia. So I don't know, and I apologize if I'm incorrect, but that's just what the research I did. But they also said that, yeah, it's descendants of Holocaust survivors also had higher cortisol levels, the stress hormones and stuff. It's just all
That
very
makes a lot of
interesting.
sense.
Yeah.
That is.
So what to do with
It's
all
very
this talk?
fascinating.
Yeah. What to do with all this talk about where conditioning, like, so we could have these ideas of where conditioning comes from, but why do we care? Right. So in the original teachings, Human Design by Ra, your friend, Robert Allen Krakow. So he taught that deconditioning, the process of deconditioning, is 7 years. It's just set in stone. It's just going to take you 7 years from when you first learn about human design to
Well,
decondition.
they do say that all of your cells are replenished every 7 years. You're basically
That's
brand new.
that's what it's based on. Exactly. Oh, look at you, line 2 natural.
Science.
We're going to do profile lines next, I think. But there are cells in the body that don't do that. Like the cells in the eye, they're always the same. It's the same cells throughout your life.
You never get new eye cells.
That's what I heard.
I know that your nose and your ears keep growing your entire life.
Well, and I think there was one of there's certain ones in the brain as well, I'd heard, that don't die off and regenerate. And they all regenerate at different rates. Like the cells inside your intestines are at a different rate than your heart cells and the other cells, So it's like, is that really true? I don't know.
Well, it's just that every 7 years you basically have all new cells. They're not saying it
But
takes 7 years for every cell to.
I don't know if it's 7 years from when you first learn about human design. I think it could potentially be 7 years from when you just first start learning about yourself in whatever way you want to do that, of self-awareness. Like I said, we know mine came through yoga, but I've also done lots of other things. I've done the Reiki training, learn about energy healing. I've done a couple years of studying Course in Miracles and changing your mindset and doing all this other stuff. And a lot of that was done way before I ever heard of human design. And yes, it's given me more insight, but I mean, I don't think it started the whole process. Um,
So he's saying it takes 7 years to completely decondition. So like you have no at the end of 7 years, you have none of this conditioning that you arrived
I
to human
mean,
design with.
that was yes, that was what he taught was that just don't expect anything before 7 years. Like it's a process, which it is a process. But I think what we know now, there's lots of different ways we can use different modalities that can help accelerate the process. So,
Yeah.
which brings me to the next stop that I think, or next point that I think we can choose to heal at whatever pace we want. We can choose to change things
Yeah.
because we're going to talk about profiles here soon. You're a line 6 profile. And one of the things about a line 6 profile is that a lot of people, when they first hear about it, well, you're not really going to do anything in life till you're about 50.
Hmm.
Well, what, how does that help
Why?
anybody for the first 50 years, right? That's,
Yeah.
that's what gets gleaned out of everything, but that's not all there is to it. And that's what I
Hmm.
think here in this, because if you remember when he delivered this in 1987, when it was brought to him by the voice, I don't feel like the majority of people were doing a lot of inner work. I mean, this was the excess of the 80s, which we just watched
Yeah.
the other night. We watched it. I think I've seen it before, but we watched American Psycho. Have you ever seen that movie?
I don't think so.
And it was made in 2000. But as I was watching, I was like, was the 2000s really that long ago? But I soon realized I was like, oh no, that it's set in 1980 something, right? It's
Mm.
on Wall Street, that time that your fiance thinks was probably the great time of greed is good. That remember
Yeah.
greed is good, and and it's just really a commentary and I'm just how shallow and vapid and greedy and that whole culture was. And then there's the yuppie culture. It was all about status and outward attainment and who had what and what restaurants you had reservations
Hmm.
at and everything. So this is about the same time that this system was delivered. And
At that point, I can see it taking 7 years.
yeah, because there wasn't a whole lot of support. But now in 2022, I mean, people are a lot more aware. They're doing
Hmm.
a lot of work before they come to human design. And I think when
Yeah.
they do finally come to human design, that it's just that accelerator point to be like, whew,
Hmm. It
So
just clicks things in a little bit more.
but the first step for any of it, whether you're brand new on the journey or you're starting to refine and really want to dig into where some of these things might be affecting you, is awareness. Is really to just observe your daily reactions to your environment. And even when you start, a meditative practice, the first step is just sitting there and observing your thoughts, which is why most people don't start a meditation process because they think they'll just sit there and suddenly be blissful. But no, it's a lot of just sitting there and going, I'm thinking. So mindfulness, observing your daily reactions, thoughts, journaling helps. You don't have to do it on pen and paper anymore. There's lots of great journals there for on your phone for all you youngsters out there who
I love pen and paper.
I know. I love it too, but I've got carpal tunnel, so it doesn't always work out. But you can just start to see, and you might not see it right away, but you go back and look. I can go back and look at journals and be like, oh my God, is this the same person? Like, what? How did I even think some of these things? And so you really just start to become the observer of your own process, your own thoughts, and what you're doing. Do you ever do that, Haley? Do you ever wonder why you're thinking what you're thinking?
Sometimes, but it's kind of like I've touched on. It's pretty much sometimes when I'm falling asleep
Mm-hmm.
and then I just kind of follow my trail of thoughts and then I work
Mm-hmm.
back to see how I got there and then I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
how did I get from what made me go from this thought to this thought? But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't ever.
Well, here, I'll do something. I'll challenge you to something. Anybody else
Oh.
out there challenge you? So the next time that, say, maybe you get annoyed with someone, maybe your fiance, maybe somebody at Publix, maybe a coworker, instead of just being annoyed and being angry, I want you to observe yourself being
Mm-hmm.
angry or annoyed and see if you can't either write it down or whatever, start to deconstruct. Does that remind you of something? Why did it come up? What was a specific thing about it? And is it really what that person's doing? Is it you? Is it? Because I always noticed this when I was first doing a lot of these experiments of like just automatic pilot behaviors. We have these conditioned responses. And it was in traffic. Or if, you're running late and you're in traffic and you catch every light and you're just like, oh, so mad. It's this person's fault that I'm late and it's this and that and blah, blah, blah. Just all the garbage in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day I remember I was feeling that way. And then I was like, I just started laughing because I was like, well, you're the one that left late. Like, is it really a big deal? Did that person really do anything to you? No. Is this really going to be that? Is there a bigger problem here? Is it, just like questioning yourself, like, what are you actually thinking about? And what are you actually reacting to? Because a lot of times it's not what's happening. So just pay attention maybe for the next couple days, weeks, see if you just keep checking in to see if you're acting automatically or if you're actually intentional about what you're saying or your reactions. It's
try to remember
it's tricky. It's unpleasant at times. But basically, yeah, just what stories are you telling yourself about your life, about people in your life? And one really good thing when you want to start digging into some of this stuff is really, if you look at your life right now, for anyone who's listening, who's feeling dissatisfied in a job or a relationship, or they're just feeling stuck or whatever's happening in your life is really a reflection of whatever's going on inside. It's just bringing it to you. And I hate to say it in that sense of like, oh, you deserve it. It's not that. It's just like what you think about yourself and your life is really what's reflected outside of you. And so it really is that you can, it sounds trite, but you really can change things outside of yourself by changing what you think about them, what stories you tell about these situations. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, like I know sometimes I have found that sometimes if I'm feeling overwhelmed, like if I just tidy up a lot, like just pick up Bailey's toys or like clean off the counter, wipe off, clean up the kitchen, like that could definitely help to make me feel less overwhelmed, even though I may not have really realized that I was maybe even overwhelmed about that, but it's just I felt overwhelmed in general. And then I just kind of do that and I feel better a little bit.
Okay. Well, and you could look at another layer of that of like what is overwhelm. It's things that feel a little out of your control. So what do? You went and worked on things you can control, like the cleanliness of your house. Mindset's my favorite thing. You know that. I have become the queen of the reframe. I love a reframe. I love when somebody come to me and tell me all their problems they're having with somebody. And I'll be like, have you thought about it this way? Let's look at it a different way. And they're usually like, that's a good way to look at it. I mean, I don't have all the answers, but I just like to try and pose a different way of looking at things. So, but for everybody out there listening, since we talked about the conditioning and where they could possibly come from, different aspects of your life, your chart, things you can see, things you can't necessarily see. But really, a goal here today to introduce this conversation is to just encourage people to be curious. Be curious about themselves. Be curious about certain beliefs that they might have. Just start paying attention. Look at your chart. Where is your openness in the chart? If you can, if you have the information, you can run charts of everybody around you. Just literally what I've done. That's how I've learned so much is
You've done the dog.
Well, it is how you have what?
You did the dog. You did her chart.
Oh,
your dog.
I was like, is that some kind of like cool slang I don't know about? You did the dog.
You did the dog.
I'm like, well, okay, teach me, young one. But seriously, I mean, that's really where I started is just like I said, in genetic matrix, if you have like a a paid account, because you can run free charts, but it won't save them. So if you do run your chart in Genetic Matrix, or anybody you know, make sure you download it to your computer or screenshot it or something so you can keep it. So you don't have to keep running it again. But if you have like which it's nothing, I think it's like the highest level of paid membership is like $9 a month, which is what I have. But you can store people's charts, and like there's my chart, and then there's Haley. And then there's Ian, and then there's my friend Tora. Richard's way down there. I don't know why. There's a few people in between. Probably because it took me a while to try. I'm still figuring out his birth time. But yeah, so you literally just, because the people around you are the ones that you know, and we're going to talk more about this in later episodes about relationships and everything and how useful this information is, especially in relationships. But yeah, it can, help you learn, even looking up like celebrities, people you think, I do it all the time now. I hear somebody famous on a podcast talk, and I might go look up their chart if I can find their information. And it's like so interesting because you can see how things get expressed differently through different people. But anyways.
Yes, I think it was yesterday I was checking out at Publix, and they had one of the magazine articles. It was like 10 celebrities that are secretly obsessed with fame, and I just rolled my eyes about it. But then one of the actresses that they had up there, it was 3 actresses was who they actually had on the cover with that title, which kind of annoyed me. But yes. One of them was Sandra Bullock, and I just thought, I was like, oh, she's a reflector.
She's not obsessed with fame. That is the...
No. It really annoyed her me on a that podcast. It was 3 women.
She's like talking about not working anymore right now because she wants to be home with her children, and she wants to renovate buildings in Texas where she lives. Ugh, what a diva.
She's obsessed with fame. That was a stupid
rags.
thing.
I can't believe I used to, not that one, but boy, I used to read freaking gossip rags. Like, who was I? All right, so we're going to wrap up today's episode, and like I said, I hope all of you that listen got some value out of this. We appreciate you listening, and get curious with yourself.
Question everything.
Yeah, well, you don't have to anymore, but yeah. Start journaling. See what you think. Get out your chart.
Start paying attention to how you feel, how things make you feel, I guess.
It's kind of the same statement, things make you feel. No, it's how you react to things. Yeah, because I mean, that's a good place to look where your conditioned beliefs, thoughts, behaviors are, is because it's automatic pilot, because that's what your brain does. It filters out things that it doesn't think are, necessary. The reticulator activating system, which I forgot to mention that earlier, but, it is there to make thinking easier for us so we survive. And unfortunately, it just puts us on autopilot most of the time. One day, one of these episodes, we're going to dig deep into subconscious stuff because it's fascinating how the brain works.
I always think of an iceberg. I love the iceberg analogy.
I love that picture. Yeah. Okay. All right, Haley. So we're going to wrap it up again. Here we go.
Again.
You're in the car now. I'm at the front door waving. Bye.
It's the Phillips goodbye.
It's the Phillips goodbye. It's long. It's looping.
There's like 5 stages.
But it will end eventually. So thanks for listening. We really appreciate you. Bye, Haley.
Bye.
Bye. Well, you made it all the way to the end of today's episode, so you must have liked what you heard. If you did, make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode, and perhaps leave us a good review. And if you know someone who wants to dig into all things human design with us, make sure you share this podcast with them. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Catch you in the next episode.